Let's do this, Mr. Lockhart.
What's up, everybody? What's going on? Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're having a great conversation tonight's show. It's the tragedy of racism in black and white. So, talking about the Ahmaud Arbery story as well as racism within this country, the tragedy of it. And we have a great guest panel here with us, joining us tonight. So let me go ahead and introduce them. For starters, I said I was going to say it, His Imperial Majesty, Mr. Richard Graves, co-host of the 13%, is here with us this evening. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you, man. It's a pleasure to have you. Stepping in for us this evening as well, we have the Shanna Marie, who's joining us as a avid contributor to Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Fantastic, fantastic. And we couldn't do this show if it wasn't for the host of Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist, who is sponsoring the show and launching his channel for the evening for the first time tonight. YFNA News on YouTube. Please welcome the Ethan Micheal. How are you, sir?
The Ethan Micheal. I like that. Can I just point out that you have a Superman hat and you have a Superman shirt? We should have lined this up so I had a Superman attire too.
Right.
I mean, a woman shirt too. This could have been.
We could have all been Kryptonians for the day.
We could have been. We could have been. Hey, so tonight we are having a difficult discussion or conversation that just really needs to be had after the events of the Ahmaud Arbery case came to light via the video that everybody has seen that has gone viral now with some new developments. So we're going to get into that a little bit, but I want to make sure that everybody is aware with a bit of a disclaimer. The conversation that we're going to have, it can be a bit triggering for some people. It can be uncomfortable for some people. And it's a conversation that still needs to be had. We can't move forward unless we have that conversation. So please know that the discussion tonight will be a little bit triggering, but be prepared for that. Also, we are asking that as you comment and share your questions on this live stream, please remember to be respectful. We're having an adult conversation of things that need to be had. If you are not going to abide by being respectful, then you got to go. That's just the end of it. But at the end of the day, it's definitely a conversation, an uncomfortable one, but a conversation nonetheless that needs to be had. So with that, I invite you to share this on your page, start a watch party, get your friends and family involved. In fact, I know that there are some people who weren't able to share this or this whole scenario or case on their page because of intimidation. So it's definitely something that we as a country need to start having, and we're glad that you can be here and join in with us. So thanks for joining us. Let's get started with just a little bit of a background for everybody so that they know kind of who we are. I am Rick, co-host of Colorful Circle. That's Colorful, F-U-L-L Circle with Rick and Al. My fiance and partner couldn't be with us, but is sending his best wishes. The platform is a opportunity to have conversations about things that impact the communities that we identify with. So for us, whether it's being Black, being male, being gay, being Christian or human, we look to have those conversations and provide a full circle resource for that. You can find us on Apple, iTunes, podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio. Just search under Intellectual Radio Talk under the podcast section and look for Colorful Circle. Mr. Richard Graves, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and a little bit about your show that you co-host. Let me say, your co-host has said that it's her birthday today. She is asking for us to sing Happy Birthday, Cynthia. She said she wants a song, but I'm that's neither here nor there. We'll get to that. But happy birthday, Cynthia. Go ahead, Richard. Tell us a little bit about your show.
Well, we host a show called The 13%. Cynthia McDonald is my co-host, and she is very intelligent, very good co-host, and always good to have conversations with. And her opinions I always find both educational and also entertaining, because she knows how to put it out there.
Yes, she does. She is such a smart, intelligent woman. Really, yeah, so really
enjoy. I'm looking forward to us continuing, doing our show every other Wednesday. I don't have all the information how to link it, but I usually have it up on my Facebook page. She has it on hers. We have it on our blog platform. So, mine is the Richard Graves Group blog platform, and you can find the show there. I am, by academic discipline, a political scientist, a theologian, and a historian. I have a master's degree in religious studies and biblical studies. I have a master's degree in history, American history, with emphasis in social history, and I'm a PhD candidate in a public policy program. So that's what I do. I'm also a DJ and a former Marine. I
appreciated that DJ mix while I was getting ready for the show today, sir.
Thank
you so much for that. Follow him on SoundCloud.
Yeah, follow me on SoundCloud. That is Richard Graves, His Imperial Majesty. That's my DJ name. So
that's why
I don't want people to. Yeah, I don't want people to think that I'm probably related to some emperor somewhere, but I don't claim any throne at this time.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Richard. And then Shanna, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, your background as well.
I guess my educational discipline would be education itself. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary education. I have a focus also to teach middle school. I taught in Joliet at 7th and 8th grade levels. I taught science in an inclusion room, which means that special education was also a part of the classrooms I taught. So I taught in a room that had both general education students and special education students taught within the same classroom. It was a 2-teacher taught system. So I was responsible for bringing the general education. So I brought the science knowledge, so to speak, to the table. I also worked with a co-teacher who was more trained in special ed training and would modify the curriculum, although I also have an endorsement for teaching special education as well. Currently, I am not in the classroom. I am getting a master's degree in instructional education for e-learning. So putting education online and creating instructional materials on a web-based format is kind of what I'm transferring my degree into currently.
Nice. Okay. Sounds good. And now Ethan hosting the several shows that you have. Tell us a little bit about all of what you have going on and the launch of your new channel on YouTube.
So I'll just make it quick because I don't want to go too much into what I'm doing. Let's just say, through this quarantine, I started streaming, and then I just started streaming a lot more, and I turned it into, the enjoying entertainment. So if you like the entertainment side, you could go to YouTube and go to search Dark Media. If you like the religious side, you can go to Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. Or if you like political or socio-political news and all other topics like the 13%, you can see them here on YFNA News. So pretty exciting. But Rick, I got to say, this is a intense topic. And I will say this is the first time I think I've seen your look right now. It saddens me, and that's the thing. While this entire situation is so frustrating to deal with, I can't even fathom what it is like to be in your or Richard's position and having to deal with this day in and day out, because it does piss me off. And I'm a white dude, so I don't know I'm not going to pretend to know how you feel, but.
Well, hey, that's appreciated, Ethan. I'm just at a technical point here. I think that I'm not sure if they're able to see this on Facebook, but I hear that it's up on YouTube. So hopefully they're able to see this on Facebook as well. But I see the comments are kind of people are checking in now, and that's really great to see that people are joining in this conversation and discussion. Hey, here's the thing. When the video first aired, I think unfortunately, it hit a lot of people. It hit Black people. It hit white people. It definitely portrayed or exposed something that has been a reality for Black people in general for decades, for centuries. Right? We have the issue of race, and one of the things I think that for this particular discussion, I wanted to use quotes around an uncomfortable conversation. The reason for that is because for Black people, this is not an uncomfortable conversation. We've been having this conversation. We have this conversation. We have to be cognizant of racial issues. Right. Whereas for white Caucasian Americans, it's one of those privileges. You don't have to be cognizant about race. So the conversation then becomes uncomfortable to have. But I don't know, Richard, let me ask you, man, when you saw the video, how did you feel? How did you react? What were kind of some of your initial reactions there?
Well, when I first saw the video, I was trying to, discern what exactly happened and trying to see, obviously, a lot of people say I need to see more, you know, in order to determine what's going on. But I was trying to get, before I actually emotionally responded, I wanted to see what the facts, what actually happened. Now we have some context in it, and it saddens me because, you know, we see ourselves in other African Americans, obviously, people who look like us. We see our children, we see our nephews, we see our sons, you know. So it is disturbing because the first thing you worry about is, you know, is this some, you know, it's just more the same thing, you know, somebody killing a black person with impunity. And of course, then we go through the basic things of people trying to rationalize it or minimize it or deflect and talk about black and black crime. So all the normal things happen. So I was just preparing for that. But what disturbed me the most is in our current social political environment that as soon as this happened, you know, you can, the right wingers are going to try to find a reason to blame the black guy. You know, the left is going to take it as from the perspective of, you know, another minority shot dead by, you know, people either in law enforcement or wanting to be law enforcement. So it just disturbed me on a few levels, you know, and the more I hear about it, you know, the more, you know, now you got this video going around saying he was walking through a construction site house and people justifying him getting shot because of that. And then, of course, you have all the YouTube/Facebook/Twitter law enforcement experts and use of force experts to come along with their narrative. So it's just disturbing that, you know, we can't even have a human discussion without politicizing it.
I saw your post about the YouTube University degree. I thought that was perfect because, you know, everybody has their videos out on YouTube. That makes them an expert on things now.
Yeah.
Shanna, let me ask you a question. I'm curious to kind of get your perspective on this because, you know, Ethan and I, we spoke a little bit about this. This is kind of what sparked the show. He had only been exposed to a few posts from, you know, it's kind of like his black friends, right?
Yeah.
That's where he saw the post, and even then it was, you know, not triggering enough. Let me ask, how did you come across seeing the video? Like, where did you see it? How did you react?
I would say the same black friends, specifically former coworkers. So former black educators actually shared it on Facebook. That's the first place I saw it. To me, I think you're absolutely right when you say that this is an uncomfortable situation for Caucasians. This is not something African Americans get to opt out of. I worked in a highly diverse school system. I've seen this. You know, I can't say that when I see that video, I see myself, but I see my former students. You know, that's who I see when I see that video. They don't get to opt out of these conversations. Most of the most uncomfortable race conversations I had were when I was an educator because I worked with middle school students and they have uncomfortable conversations about everything.
Right.
So we had every difficult conversation under the sun, and especially working with some students in special education. I had my behavioral disorder students in there too. Uncomfortable topics are just, you know, territory in middle school. And it's something that those children don't get to ignore. I'm part Hispanic, and I can say that, you know, it's something I got to ignore because I have the privilege of having very pale skin. When people look at me, they don't assume I'm Mexican. So when I walk down the street and people say racist comments, I can walk past it because people don't necessarily get to pinpoint it at me. Other people don't have that privilege. And the problem is that other Caucasians won't admit this. They won't say that racism is still there. It's an uncomfortable situation and they just want to turn away from it. And that is the problem.
You know, speaking of that, turning away from it, I'm curious, Ethan or Shanna, you know, at the time that I found it, for me personally, not hurtful, but I guess surprising. Let's say it's surprising that after the video was posted, the video came out, there became this, you know, kind of outrage about it. I posted on my page. And I had several friends who would go and comment and talk about how dreadful this is and how horrible this is and, you know, this and that. But I would go to their page and not see a post about it. You find it ironic that, you know, you look at, you know, maybe your white family of friends, Caucasian family of friends who have not really spoken out about this at all. What do you do about that?
That's a tough one, and I will say I am a little saddened. Now, I guess there's two parts to this. For one, I hate to say ignorance, but the first part was I when I saw this, I didn't actually look at the video. I saw some comments, and I'm like, okay, I got to remember to look into this. And it was when you called me afterwards that I watched that video, and my jaw just dropped. It's like this is not acceptable. Like, why is this happening? Never mind. I'm going to go into a rant, and I don't want to. But I guess my where I was going with is, I will say it kind of saddens me because there are many white people I'm seeing that are outright refusing to come on camera. Like, to give you an example, I had text messages that said, look, I support what you're doing. I'm glad you're doing it, but I just can't be a part of it. And it's like, what do you mean you can't be a part of this? This is not just a race issue. This is a humanitarian issue. Like, we need, as you said to me, Rick, it is up to the oppressors to start stepping forward on behalf of the oppressed, although I probably butchered the way you explained it.
Right. It's close enough.
I wouldn't use the term oppressors and oppress. That phraseology.
That was mine.
Yeah, that phraseology of oppressors and oppress shuts down the conversation real quick.
Okay.
And the reason it does is you have to understand, historically in America, the way people see race and racism, right? They see it as black people were once slaves. Now you're not. Get over it. And whenever we bring up anything, well, slavery was over in 1865, without acknowledging the history of Jim Crow, without acknowledging the history of the civil rights movement. So you have to choose your phraseology in order to try to get people to understand when you want them to understand.
So what should I have said, or what would be?
Let me just clarify. That was actually a quote that I had taken from somewhere. Can't remember where, but the quote was, "It's not up to the oppressed community to change the behaviors of the oppressor. It's the onus is on the oppressors to change that behavior amongst themselves."
Right. And I think in this particular case, I would say that it's a majority-minority thing. The majority population has a comfort that the minority population doesn't. Minority population has to live within a structure where we have to constantly acknowledge and understand the majority culture. We have to understand white people to function in American society. White people as a majority have the privilege of not having to understand anything about us.
Yep.
And therefore that causes the disconnect. They can disconnect themselves away from the situations because they're not realities to them, because they don't deal with it every day. And unfortunately, because of the politicization in our country, it's still an us versus them dynamic. So black people, we are considered by white society, not every white individual. Let me make this clear. White individual racism is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about someone being individual racist. We're not talking about, that all white people hate black people. And that's the defenses I normally get when this is brought up. We could say one thing, well, you're saying all white people hate black people. No, we're not saying that.
No, not at all.
So that's why I'm always just specific in saying that we're talking about systems and institutions and a culture that's predicated on the idea of white supremacy. American culture, American society is predicated on the idea of white male superiority. That is a historical fact. There is no debating or arguing it. And once people accept that predicate, then they understand the systems and institutions that serve this country were built in that worldview. And that has not been dismantled. Now, the cultural aspect that we're talking about is regard to not seeing blacks as human. So when a white person sees that video, it's a black person. They're not humanizing them, all right? Because they don't have to. We as African Americans are taught to humanize white people because they're a majority. We have to, because we have to interact. Whites, a lot of time, are not taught to humanize black people. And even if they know a black person in their small town or, in their neighborhood, that person is different, because you always hear them say, black people this, well, except for Bob who lives around the corner, his family, because they humanize the individual blacks they know.
Yep.
But they don't see us as a group. And unfortunately, the myth of America, the mythology of America, I should say, that America is a white Christian country and we're allowed to stay here. So anytime we speak up, we're guests here as far as the culture is concerned. So it's like, just be happy we allow you to be here, which is part of the reason you saw that anger towards Colin Kaepernick. Be happy that we let you play this game and make these millions of dollars, entertain us. We don't want to hear about your problems. So that's it, so
Yeah.
that's where we're at with things.
I would like to say that I absolutely support what Colin Kaepernick does. I support anybody, because I'm sorry, kneeling is absolutely the freedom of what America was founded on. You can choose to kneel during the national anthem. You can sit out for the pledge. That is what American freedom is.
Kneeling is also by far peaceful protest. So anybody wants to argue against that, I don't really see where the argument is.
Well, I mean, when we talk about the several examples of protesting that have taken place over the past couple of weeks, with the attempt to reopen states and country, and how those protests went, versus Colin Kaepernick taking a knee during the national anthem to use his platform, and people want to say that he's doing it for the recognition and come up with all these other excuses, but at the end of the day, he took that knee to bring light, using that platform to light this very thing, that Black people are in this country still being gunned down and killed, and lives being taken away, right? I know the Black Lives Matter movement became just this whole politicized thing, but initially, and Richard, I know we had some conversation about this once before. Black Lives Matter, just that phrase alone should have grabbed the most attention and stayed right there. That Black lives do matter, and that we're a part of this country, but we're not seen as that. But I know, Richard, we were talking about Black Lives Matter and wanting to have this rally within our community, but we have people like, shall we say her name, Candace Owens, who
it's like summoning Satan, man.
So for those of you who are watching that may not know, Candace Owens got on live and talked about really disparaging the whole situation, the whole case, and just tearing down. I don't know. I can't even describe what she did. It was so disturbing to see in a way. But in her mind, in her stance, she was trying to, I guess, enlighten everyone on what the facts of the case were. Right. Here's some of the things of the facts of this case. These two men, they attempted to execute a citizen's arrest, which is legal in Georgia, right? But it has to be a known felony taking place, if I remember correctly.
May I? I have it right in front of me.
Please, yeah, go ahead. What is that?
In Georgia, the law states that a private person may arrest someone if a crime is committed in his presence. So right there, that's the first problem. The crime was not committed in their presence.
Exactly.
Or within his immediate knowledge. Well, one, we'd have to define immediate knowledge, and two, we don't know that it was committed in his, he wasn't right there, so there's no way to tie them together. And then, but if it is a felony, the citizen can stop someone from escaping if the citizen has reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. This was not a felony. So right there is nothing legal about what they did. They did not do anything under Georgia law. So
correct. And it also says that they can detain. It doesn't say that they can pursue or gun down.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why, I try not to let people get distracted by that. And let me explain. If he was committing a felony, if he was, all right, problem is not you trying to do your citizen's arrest if that's what you want to do. The problem is the use of force. All right. Even a police officer cannot shoot you dead for suspicion of robbery. It's not legal in any state. Okay.
Not supposed to. Not supposed to.
Well, they can, but by the law, you're not supposed to.
They're not supposed to.
As a private citizen approaching another citizen, accusing them of something, and then gunning them down, creating a situation where they use deadly force, that's the part that's not justifiable in any way, shape, or form. He would have to be he was not armed. Okay, the threat was caused because they confronted and tried to stop him. All right, he don't know why you're stopping him. You know, if you come up on me, I'm going to try to fight you too. You know, if I'm trying to do right for you. All they had to do was, if they really thought he was doing something, just follow him, call the police, meet me here. I'm following this guy. He just robbed or did whatever. That's not what they did. So the discussion about the legality of it, this is a Candace Owens radical right-wing trick that they always do. They always try to throw all these distractions and deflections to get away from the main point that they killed the man, and therefore that was not justified. I don't care if he was stealing from a construction site. If he was, it's not justified. Now, and so that's what Candace Owens them try to do. They try to throw in all the deflection, or let me deal with the number one deflection real quick. What about black on black crime? Right? I'm so tired of hearing it. So let me put this out there. Statistically,
put it out there, Richard.
Yeah, most crime is committed between people of the same race. Most white people who are killed by white people. Most black people who are killed by black people. It's just that simple. Okay. Are there areas that, you know, urban African American areas where there's crime like that, you know, from the gangbanging stuff like that, whatever it is? Yes, it happens. All right, but that's not an either or situation. What we're talking about here is a citizen being killed by citizens under the auspices of them doing, them upholding the law. You know, so a black man is always a suspect. A black man doesn't have a right to jog. A black man, you know, can't walk with his Skittles and his iced tea. You know, it'd be bad enough if this was law enforcement, but it was people. The investigator did not have police powers, because if he had police powers still, he would have been able to arrest him, period. But he didn't have
a former investigator, right?
Right. Well, there are a lot of states where retired police officers still have police powers where they can arrest people.
Gotcha.
But he didn't have that, you know. So again, this is more, the problem is not crime. You know, we could talk about black on black crime, which I hate the phrase, it's actually just called crime. All right. But, you know, they use it as a deflection in order to not talk about what we're looking at here. And what we're looking at here is someone who decided on their own that they were going to stop and use deadly force on a person who had no weapon, who wouldn't have been a threat if you hadn't confronted him in the first place. Mm-hmm. And you were actually a threat. He was minding his business. If he thought he did something, call the police and follow him. It's just that simple. So again, with the black on black crime thing, I'm just going to end it with this. That's a deflection also. You know, and I believe Candace Owens brought that up too. You know, people, what about black on black crime? What about Chicago? I
didn't even know who she was until somebody shared that video with me, man. I was like, and again, I was like, who is she? But you know, I think also if I can interject here with the whole situation or scenario, we wonder why we have a distrust in the legal system within our country. Not only were these two individuals who murdered Ahmaud
absolutely
free for 10 weeks, like 10, a little bit over 10 weeks, right? But now we're in a position where two of the prosecutors have recused themselves because of their connection to, while also sharing details or comments about the whole situation. You know, I find it remarkable that it's always just trust the justice system, trust the judicial process, when you literally have a cover-up very similar to what took place here in Chicago, as a friend of mine, Joseph Young, pointed out with the Laquan McDonald case, right, where you had this cover-up that took place for a duration of time until it was exposed. Why? Where is the trust in the judicial system? How do we gain trust back in the judicial system when you consistently not only have the murder of innocent Black lives, but you also have the cover-up that continuously takes place?
Real quick, I want to touch on, it's a bit off topic, but if you're watching right now in Rick's watch party, if you want your comments to be seen on screen, either go to my page or the YouTube channel and comment there.
That's because he's a sponsor of tonight's show. Yeah, definitely check and follow Ethan.
No, that's not what I meant. Well. I mean, so when they comment,
no, I'm being facetious. It's totally okay.
When they comment in the watch party, it won't show up on screen. So if you want your comments to be seen, go to one of those platforms.
I do appreciate all of you all who are tuned into my watch party too. Thanks so
Yes.
much. Make sure you share this on your page as well.
By the way, Rick, you just broke some simultaneous viewing records. So,
I mean, but it's us having this conversation, guys, because it needs to be had, and I know that people want to have it, but again, like I said, I saw like I think I mentioned earlier, a friend of mine, a black guy, he posted on his Facebook page about how his white friend saw the video, saw what happened, but was intimidated by his close circle of family and friends and what they would say. So he opted not to post on his page. Again, hey, listen, I'm gonna throw that out there. Again, if we don't have this conversation openly, right, we're never going to be able to make some changes. But Richard, I think when we talked about earlier before the show, we kind of conversed about the Black community and the steps that the Black community should be taking. And I think I love the point that you made about voting and holding our elected officials accountable.
yes.
Give us a little bit of some perception of where you are with that, kind of your outlook there.
Well, when we were talking about that, I was simply saying that as a community, we need to do what we need to do for ourselves. And I'm not saying that excuses any responsibility from the rest of society, but we need to vote people in, and not just vote them in, but hold those people accountable to what exact public policy outcomes we want. And these have to be meat and potatoes things. This is not a Republican or Democrat thing. I think we talked about that. I said that as African Americans or as Americans in general, I don't think you should vote Democrat or Republican. You should vote for a candidate that you can hold accountable, regardless of party, that wants to serve the community that they're voted in to serve. And in this case, this is not like with a regular law enforcement issue where you have a police, aside from the judicial aspect you said. See, all those judges and prosecutors that are in all the state's attorney or district attorney they have down there, all of them people should be voted out of office at the end of this. All right, because that's holding them accountable, because they're playing games. In Chicago, we talked about with Anita Alvarez when she got voted out of office for the Laquan McDonald situation. She should have got voted out of office. And I'm glad, and that showed me what you can do when you get pissed off enough, that you can get out there and do some actual action. Now, again, I would hope that they hold the new mayor and the new state's attorney for Cook County accountable also, and keep them accountable, because that's the only way you get what you want. If you don't hold them accountable, if you just keep voting them in, they're going to keep doing what they do. So you have to hold elected officials accountable. So in the aspect of what's going on in Georgia, I would hope that the African Americans in that community remember election time when it's time to elect these judges and prosecutors, okay, and mayors or county board members, so they can, address how this whole situation went, why the police didn't arrest them, who's responsible for that. Elect a new mayor, fire the police chief. Simple as that. Hold people accountable.
I would hope that it is that simple, but I think that that also kind of depends on if the community down there is united in that front, right? I don't know what the demographics.
I don't know what the demographics are down there.
Yeah. But Shanna, let me ask you a question, because you've had experience in education, and I'm just out of curiosity, right? In your experience with education, how do you, as you said, you have uncomfortable conversations with the students that you teach. How do you have this conversation, or do you even have it at all? Because I know in school systems you got the politics of what your curriculum is supposed to be, but right, these are the future. This is the future generation that's going to be involved in things like politics, things like racial concerns, and how does that look in the classroom?
Since I'm no longer a teacher there anymore, I'll say you're probably not supposed to have those conversations, but I definitely had them. I think the best way it looks in the classroom is just trying to have these open and honest conversations with children when they're still young. I think we often lose the idea that when they're younger, they often don't have a lot of the garbage and baggage that comes in from social media, from hearing things from other people. And they will come with a certain amount of things, but they're going to be more open and honest. They don't have as much of a guard, is what I mean. They know enough. They have the perspective, but they don't come in with as heavy of a guard as perhaps adults do. And I think you just have to have those open, honest conversations. Sometimes things are going to get ugly, and that has to be allowed, because sometimes things need to be said so that things can get fixed, so that things can come to a consensus. When things are uncomfortable, you don't necessarily have just a pleasant little conversation about it. People's feelings are going to get hurt. People are going to have things trampled on. And I guess this is where you get to say, like, a lot of Caucasian people get to tap out of the race idea. And that's why a lot of Caucasians aren't going to have these conversations, because right now, I know I have family members who probably, if they did watch, one, won't watch it because they'll see the topic. Two, if they did, probably wouldn't agree with things I said. And I don't care. But there are certain people that will try to avoid those tensions within their family. And so they won't come out and say things. And I think what happens is you have to humanize the situation. So that's why I had those conversations in the classroom, because when you have a diverse group of children and they can each say it from their perspective, now we've humanized the situation. Now we've moved past the idea of just trying to imagine it from somebody else's perspective, but we've actually heard the other perspective. It's been humanized. That's how you get people to stand up for each other. That's how you get people to identify with each other, so that when they look at another human being, they don't have to see their skin color. They don't have to see their gender. They can just identify as being another human being having a human experience. That's because we have to have these conversations, but some people just want to back down. They don't want to have them because they're afraid of what's going to come up.
So you've had to have that conversation with, like, you right now have family members that won't even acknowledge this conversation at all.
I have family members who say racist things, and when myself or other family members try to explain to them that it's racist, they act like they don't understand what we're talking about. And that is the most frustrating, when people are racist and it's like they put blinders on, and it's like, do you even get it? Or are you actively not getting it because that's easier for you? I think it's the secondary one.
Oh, I was going to say briefly that as we talked earlier, white people being a majority don't have to deal with the issue. But worse than that, again, when we talk about this societal or systemic or institutional racism, I call it what it is. It's racism or systemic, institutional, societal, white supremacy. It's not racism per se, in the general sense. It is an underlying bias, an underlying worldview that is actually subconscious in most cases. So I'm not saying that it's any less dangerous that it's subconscious. For example, if me and Rick went out and we went up to a German Shepherd and we shot it in the head and it was on video, that would be on a lot of white people's pages right now.
And you know what? And you know what? Those white people would have no problem coming on camera right now.
Oh,
but
they'd be jail for shooting the dog, dude.
They'd be losing their mind
that
we killed an animal.
But for some reason, they will not come on and talk about
and
this.
if we use a justification, well, I felt my life was in danger from this German Shepherd. It could be a Roddy. It could be it doesn't matter. We shoot this dog. It's over with. We're going to jail. There ain't gonna be no 2-month wait. We're going to jail next day. It's gonna be outrage. White people might be picking in somebody's house. Then let me explain why I brought that up. The dog is more human in these people's eyes than me or Rick would ever be. And this comes back to American culture. Black people have been dehumanized in this country ever since we got here. We were dehumanized at the end of at the beginning of the Civil War. We were dehumanized. At the end of the Civil War, we're dehumanized. Throughout the whole Jim Crow era, we're dehumanized. All right. Then
it's 2020 and we're still dehumanized.
Remember when Mel Gibson had said that he hoped his I think ex-wife was raped by a pack of black men? Didn't use the term black men, though. Okay. That just lets you know that there is a subconscious thing there that people dehumanize black people, particularly black men. We're not human. We're beasts. We're animals, over sex crazed. We can dunk basketballs and box and do all the athletic things because that animal prowess that we have, and white women want us because of this animal prowess we have and our large penises and stuff like that. This is going on in people's head. And whether they want, like as Jack Nicholson said, A Few Good Men, whether you want to talk about it at parties or not, this is what it is. So you have to first see someone as human. So we can't even get to the point of dealing with law, dealing with the fact that that people are getting killed, unarmed black men getting killed by some armed vigilante white dude because he feels unsafe. We can't even get to that because at the end of the day, we have to first be seen as human beings, and we're not. And no matter what, people don't check their subconscious biases because this is ingrained, this is taught. This is something that's taught. It's not like, they have a class, you go to school, okay, let's teach about black men being not human. But it's taught, it's reinforced in our media, it's reinforced in entertainment, it's reinforced in sports. It's a reinforced concept. And people, once they accept that, so, white people don't want to talk about it because a lot of white people believe, well, I'm not racist. I have black friends, or you're saying all white people are racist, or you want, to raise a race war, and I'm the racist for you bringing it up. As a black man, if I bring up these things, oh my God, you're racist because I'm bringing up the fact that racism exists. So there's a lot of subconscious things in people's minds that get triggered whenever the idea of race comes up, because again, ultimately it comes down to us not being seen as human. Like I said, we kill that dog, me and Rick going to jail. All right. And that dog gets more human sympathy than if me or Rick got killed by two white guys. Well, what were they doing? Where were they? Did they make him feel threatened? The dog could be growling his teeth at me. If he hasn't bit me yet and I shoot him, white folks will lose their mind.
Well, and that was the thing with one of the deflectors, as you mentioned earlier, Richard. That was one of the indications, or one of the deflectors that people, I think, utilized was him attempting to fight for his life because he's being chased by men with guns. They said that he shouldn't have jumped on it. I think there was a comment that was going back and forth right before the show, even that you tagged me in. And the gentleman was kind of adamant about he shouldn't have lunged at him with the gun, or he shouldn't have charged at him with the gun. Are you kidding me? Like,
you shouldn't have had the gun.
Then you're the aggressor with the gun. Like, you have the gun in your hand. You are provoking this situation by having guns, not just guns. Let's be clear. They didn't just have guns. They had two shotguns. Two of them, one of him, two shotguns and one pistol. All of that because they wanted to make a citizen's arrest and potentially felt threatened. Knock it off.
No, I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to touch base on that stupid comment that came in where he's like, well, and this person puts a laughing emoji and is like, well, he shouldn't have been the aggressor. Like, what did he say? What kind of idiot, goes after someone with a gun? Like, I'm sorry. Yeah. Are you, not you, but are you that stupid? If someone points a gun in your face and you don't know their intentions, you don't go, oh, okay, I'm sorry, whatever you say. You don't know what you're going to do. You have to fight for your life. Now, put yourself in the position of an African American with two white people chasing you with shotguns and tell me you wouldn't be scared out of your mind and fight back. And it's ridiculous that people think otherwise. Ooh.
Hey, I want to talk somebody just sign.
Any of those comments that say, oh, well, he shouldn't have been over in a construction area, or they shouldn't have been doing this. Anytime you say a black person shouldn't have been doing this, or they look suspicious, to me is the same as saying, well, that woman shouldn't have been wearing that dress, or she shouldn't have got raped. It's Absolutely. The same darn thing.
Well, there's a term that I recently learned about called white fragility that I want to get into a little bit later on. But I want to read a comment here. Kay Bradley mentioned down here, dehumanizing black people allows white people to be complacent in promoting equality. Why would white people even address a quote unquote problem as long as they're not adversely affected? And I think that goes back to Richard's point. Black people have been dehumanized since blacks were brought to the country, right? At the onset of chattel slavery, we were property, and we can't seem to break that mentality. And I'm wondering, if there's anything that can be done to end that cycle. Like where is the start of that outside of just having a conversation? Where is the start of that?
You have to restructure the schools. I'll tell you one thing. You take the children in a predominantly white neighborhood and the children in a predominantly black neighborhood and just switch their school building for 1 week. Just do that. Because I'll tell you, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and the school that I went to is not the same school that I taught at working in Joliet. And what was available, and this is a 10-year this is like a decade and a half difference of me being in school to me actually being a teacher in a classroom. I had more technology available to me a decade and a half previous being in that school, which is in a predominantly Caucasian neighborhood, versus being in Joliet, which is the 4th largest city in Illinois, in a predominantly minority district. And the problem is because we base schools funding predominantly on income tax. So we're basing the funding for school based on the value of the neighborhoods. How does that not systematically keep poor children poor and rich children rich? And unfortunately, we've also systematically set that up so minorities are living in those poor neighborhoods. To me, that's one of the biggest things we have to hit right off the bat.
But go ahead, Richard, because I was going to say that kind of goes into your sentiment about holding elected officials accountable.
Absolutely. In these predominantly black areas, be it Joliet, Aurora, Elgin, Chicago, or any place else in the country. Take Chicago public schools, for example. Those are schools that have issues. Okay. There's disparity within their system where you have these magnet schools and you have these neighborhood schools, and people got to test to go into a magnet school. And if you live in a neighborhood school, you don't test well, you're just out of luck. Ultimately, though, the per capita spending for the students is about the same in the city of Chicago in the magnet schools or the neighborhood schools. The problem is the accountability and what the parents are demanding or what they know to demand. The biggest issue I would say in the school system actually starts in the grade school system, and that is the actual curriculum. When I lived in the city of Chicago when one of my stepsons was in kindergarten. And my nephew was also in kindergarten. He was in the Naperville, Aurora area. And
were you on the west side or the south side, Richard? I'm just curious.
South side, 73rd.
That's horrible. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So the moment I realized when my stepson was talking to my nephew about the differences in what they were learning, there was such a vast difference at the kindergarten level. It was a vast difference that I ended up taking my son out of public school and put him in private school. And that's one of the reasons I moved away from the city of Chicago was the education system. So ultimately, there's a difference, and it comes down to holding elected officials accountable. It comes down to holding that school board accountable. But so ultimately, if education is not fair, then you're going to get unfair outcomes. You're going to get unequal outcomes. It's just that simple.
Can I piggyback onto that curriculum piece real quick?
Yeah.
One of the challenges becomes where we see like a discrepancy in curriculum, because honestly, that is supposed to be state mandated. But the issue becomes is, like you said, it starts off different in kindergarten. It becomes, where do the children come to school at? And the issue is we don't have a lot of support in our lower income neighborhoods. So those kids who are going more to daycare and not having a one-on-one stay-at-home parent or a grandparent who has the ability to be retired, staying home with them, they are not coming to kindergarten with the same level. So we have teachers who are having the challenge of, you've got one kid who comes to school, already knows their numbers, their colors, their ABCs, and another kid who doesn't know any of that yet. And so the issue becomes, when you have a low-income neighborhood, and earlier I did say income tax, I did say mean property tax, but when we have these low income neighborhoods where we have 2-parent working households, and perhaps parents who had a lower education don't even know how to support their kids themselves sometimes is also an issue, especially sometimes if we have non-English speaking individuals as well in those low income neighborhoods. We have a larger number of children not coming ready to school. So the teachers have to essentially, I don't want to use the word dumb down, but they have to drop the curriculum to where their students are at. Because when you have 30 kids in front of you and 80% of them are at this level, that's kind of what it's going to become geared to. So again, this comes back to getting these early interventions in place in these schools. We need more pre-K in these neighborhoods who don't have, this opportunity, the privilege for these children to have a parent at home with them, because the system is set up so that both their parents have to be at work.
Or even when you're dealing with higher income areas, even if the parents are both working, in a lot of cases they are, their children are in different types of daycare where they are actually being educated.
Correct.
They're not just at the neighborhood daycare, at a girl down the street's house while you're working your CNA job and your other part-time job at Walmart and your other part-time job at Walgreens. They're at structured daycares that are teaching these children things. So they're also the fact is the social economics is the underlying problem that goes through the whole thing, through the criminal justice system, through the education system. All that comes down to the social economics, the jobs that people have, the pre-K that they have, as you talked about, the Head Start systems, they want to defund those. Every time a Republican gets in federal office, they want to take that away. Anything to help single mothers or low-income parents in general. So again, that's the policy we should be seeking. But as long as it is an us versus them scenario, as long as it's those Black people in those inner cities in Chicago are trying to take your tax money to do this, that's the problem. Because again, those Black people in the inner city of Chicago to those other people are not even human beings.
Right. We're disassociated from where our tax money goes to.
Right.
What we don't realize is that what our tax money goes to is sort of a safety net for public safety, because not everybody has family safety. I had a kid at 18, so that's technically a teen mom. I went through a lot of stuff where I had to have support from my family. If I had to completely rely on public welfare, I would not be in the place I am. And that's what people don't get, that the systemic racism that comes from slavery, we're not many generations out. So it still has an effect because it affects family money. Minorities don't have often as much of a safety net within their own families. So we have to have these safety nets within our society. And the problem is that we don't see it. Because often if I had a plate of food and somebody was hungry, most people would feed a hungry person. But when we're just completely blinded to where that charity is going to, people become detached. Like you said, it's dehumanized.
Right. And what you were saying in regard to was you were saying about, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought when you brought up the food. But you were saying regarding I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
We can try to come back to that if it pops in. Let me know. I'm curious to know from you guys. To me, there seems to be this driving sense of divide within our country that's stemming from our leadership. I don't know if you all feel that same way. To me personally, I think we had the last administration seemed to be a little bit more of a united type of a country versus the current administration that we have now. I'll say that. I don't know if you all agree with that.
I would disagree.
I
would disagray. I
was watching Michelle Obama Becoming documentary on Netflix yesterday. I miss her. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I miss her.
Me too. But let me say, I did remember what I was going to say, Shanna. I was discussing the fact we were talking about the money, what's being spent, and it comes down to an investment. It costs you what, $40,000 to $55,000 a year to house an inmate.
Right.
It costs you probably around $4,000 to $5,000 for that Head Start.
Right.
And we have to look at what's an investment in society. What gets you a better outcome? What gets you a better outcome of a citizen, as opposed to looking at it as the immediate, oh my God, we're funding Head Start and things like that. But to Rick's point about the country being united, when President Obama got elected, I voted for President Obama. And as you all know, or you don't know, I am actually a Republican. I was going to vote for Senator McCain.
Don't think I knew
I
that.
was going to vote for Senator McCain. First, I didn't even see Obama coming. I thought for sure he's going to be running against Hillary. All right. When I started seeing him talking, and debating with Hillary, I was like, okay, that's interesting. I'm still a Republican. I'm a military guy. I'm voting for McCain no matter what. And what made me not vote for McCain was not so much Senator Obama, but was Sarah Palin. She got nominated as vice president. And I felt sorry for Senator McCain. And at that point is when I began to see the polarization that we see now. It was latent. It was underlying. It has always been there. And President Obama getting elected actually triggered, this whole Tea Party movement, this whole what I call a white nationalist movement within the Republican Party. And when Obama got elected, I couldn't believe the hate and discontent I was hearing for this guy. I couldn't believe it. I was literally shocked when I was in Indiana. I got emails from the Republican Party in Indiana, that basically were saying that basically like the Stalin that took over, he's a communist. I thought they were jokes because Republicans do sometimes joke and say that liberals are socialists or communists, but they were dead serious. All right. And it got worse as time went on. I don't think that he divided the country by his leadership. I believe his presence as president, it exposed the fissures that were already there. And it really showed us that the Confederacy is alive and well, honestly speaking, because if you look at those red states, you compare it to Confederate map, it's pretty close to the same damn thing. So I think it just showed that those historical breaks in our country were still present. And Trump won by exploiting the ugly face of America that came out while Obama was president. Trump exploited it, and he turned it up a whole nother level by speaking directly to white nationalism, and speaking towards that.
Well, let me ask you this, guys, and just out of curiosity, I think that there seems to be a divide between also, not just kind of North and South, right? We'd like to believe that the North has a bit of a better handle on racism than the South. I don't necessarily think that that's true, but we know that you tend to kind of see these issues come up in the South, but there's a long list of these situations, these cases coming up, right? There's a long laundry list. In fact, if you have seen going around on social media, the Black People Are Tired post, and all of the hashtags of the different names span across our country, ranging from things like carrying a bag of Skittles to jogging to driving in a car and being broken down on the side of the road. I don't know about you, but to me, that's definitely where I'm at. Like I'm tired of posting. I'm tired of the hashtags. I'm tired of the marches that we've all done. Right, the Black people have done militant marches as well as peaceful marches. Right, we've tried to get in line and vote, and we have issues there. Like we seem to continuously come across not being able to move the needle here. And I don't know. Like I'm out of kind of ideas of what can be done next, other than saying, hey, white people, talk to the straight white men, the cisgendered men that set this standard, and start making some changes. Like start holding people accountable, start putting people in office that actually see us as human beings. Or hey, how about you start seeing us as human beings yourselves? Like how does that conversation? How do you do that?
Well, honestly, I see, and this is where we're very ignorant to our own privilege. And the problem is you get, I really don't want to name drop, but I'm just going to do it anyway. You get people like Steven Crowder who talk about white privilege being a myth. And it drives me nuts because I used to think like that. And I'm just like, oh, you don't understand that the simple fact that just because there are no maybe current laws in place restricting African-American rights doesn't mean that there isn't privilege for the white community. The African-American community has been, I don't want to say oppressed, but they were oppressed for how long? Like that doesn't go away overnight. And to me, what we need to start doing is standing up. And it not only infuriates me, but it's kind of embarrassing that I actually had to make a post and say, is there any white people that will come on camera and condemn the actions of the McMichael brothers? Like, why? Why is this so hard? Like, and that's what I think we need to start doing. And I would like to point out that the Justice for McMichael group. I got into 3 of them while we've been doing this, and I posted them. So anybody.
So the Justice. Oh, great.
Yes,
Great. Well, welcome to those that are in the Justice for McMichael's group. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Hopefully you're enjoying the conversation.
And hopefully you're getting a real perspective now, turning off other news and learning a thing or two.
Well, but that's the thing. Like, can they actually, when you talk about privilege, right? Privilege is something that you don't really know. And something I wanted to comment on too, Ethan, as you were saying, real quick. Let's not confuse racism for bad people, right? Racism, just because someone is a good person, doesn't mean that they're not racist. And I think that sometimes there's this hard line in the sand that people think, specifically people within that white privilege, who tend to think that if you're racist, you're a horrible person and you exemplify these horrible things. It's not the case. You have several people who are good people who are still inherently racist. Right. And until we can start calling that behavior out. Again, I'm personally, and I think Richard and I might differ a little bit here. I'm throwing the onus on straight cisgendered white men, and white women to hold them accountable for doing it too, because blacks have been doing it for 60 centuries now.
I'm going to say, sometimes I think people are like out protecting their racist grandma, because like you said, there can be a good person, but also a racist person. And we have sometimes a lot of elderly family members who grew up in a different time, who have some more preconceived racist biases. And a lot of Caucasians won't stand up because of those people in their family. And because they're, just a good person and I don't want to upset them.
Too bad. Too bad.
I agree. And that is exactly where it has to stop. I think this becomes as simple as what we tell kids about bullying is, you have the bully, the victim, and the bystander. And there are too many Caucasians that are standing in the bystander mode, that we're opting out because we have the privilege to. Mm-hmm. And that with that, I, not to like get super nerdy, but with like great, with that privilege, we also have a responsibility. I was going to make a Spider-Man quote, but I held myself.
I'll take a Spider-Man quote.
Wait, we got Super Rock and Superman today.
I like Peter.
I would like to, just so everyone knows, within the next probably 10, 15 minutes, we're going to bring people on just for a couple minutes to voice their concerns, show support for Arbery, and also condemn the actions of the McMichael brothers. So, white people, my challenge to you, if you want to come on the stream for 30 seconds, please put it in the comments. I can send you the link to come on the stream. We'll give you 30 seconds, and ideally, hopefully you can voice your support for this, and we can get more white people not being scared to come on camera, because literally, if your biggest concern is offending your family, then that's not a concern. This is a human life at stake. So a human died. Who cares if you offend your family? A human is no longer with us.
Several humans have died.
Of course. I'm sorry. I'm only specifically pointing to this situation.
No, I got you. No. That's for them. That's for them to hear. Hey,
right. Screw being offended. Who cares if you piss your family off? Human life is more important. But Rick, I'm sorry, I'll go into a rant.
No, it's okay.
The show is yours, my friend.
Hey, real quick, I wanted to read a quote. My sister Carrie actually she's in one of the Chicago physicians, sits on as a chair for the Diversity and Inclusion Board with her company, and she said, quote, "So I think when having discussions about race, meaningful ones, it's helpful to know what scholars are saying. Being able to identify what's happening in real time, for example, what white fragility is and what it looks like, or centering or spiritual bypassing, helps to really address things as they occur. Call people in rather than out on their behavior, because white people who haven't done their work, or even the ones who have, often fall back on these old hat behaviors. And it's important to know how to recognize and address them when they do happen." So I found that to be kind of really prolific, right? Because it does take actual work that has to be put in, right? There are things that it's not just about speaking out necessarily on social media. There was this post on Twitter I saw about being an ally, and I think I'll post this a little bit later on on my Facebook page. Please feel free to check it out. But it was really kind of a checklist of what are you, or how are you actually being an ally? If you're really being an ally, what does that look like, right? Are you checking your biases? Are you defensive when someone of a marginalized group tells you how they're feeling? Do you immediately go to reverting to how they're wrong, or so on and so forth? It was really a great checklist, but I think that quote really stood out to me in that there takes some work to be done. The Black community, the marginalized communities, have been doing it for decades. Now it's time for our Caucasian white Americans to step up and take that responsibility. But again, I think Richard and I differ a little bit on having groups, the groups to actually step up and hold people accountable, because I think I want to say that our community as a Black community should, because we have enough people to do it. But when it comes to like the younger generation, I just don't know. I don't know if they have what it takes. As my mother used to say, they haven't seen the suffering, they haven't seen the slavery, they haven't seen the Jim Crow, they haven't seen the Martin Luther Kings and the Malcolm X's, so they don't really know what it means to unite as a race of people, to be able to make the changes that were made back in the civil rights movement days.
I'm going to have to agree with you. Obviously, the civil rights movement being a different point in history and things being what they were. Obviously, I always say the beginning of African Americans actually being citizens of this country begins with the end of the civil rights movement. So we say 1964, 1965. So that's 5 years before I was born. All right. So we're basically the first generation of African Americans to be born into legal equality. So, yeah, the millennials and our children and grandchildren, they haven't seen anything like this. They have a degree of a separation from that point in history and living in modern society, which is very different. That's why I guess my problem a lot of times when I'm talking to people on the left with this is they always want to contextualize it as Jim Crow or slavery. And I'm thinking, okay, this is something different we have here right now. We need to identify what the actual problem is, and then we need to deal with it. But I think we already identified what the problem is. The last vestige of Jim Crow and slavery is the dehumanization of Black people. We have to teach young people, and I think we're doing a good job with that, because I don't think it is as bad with the younger generation regarding seeing each other as human beings. That's the primary thing. You can't care about Arbery if you don't see him as human. You can't care about Trayvon Martin if you didn't see him as human. And to me, the people that were speaking out trying to justify the murder of Trayvon Martin, or justify the murder of Laquan McDonald, or trying to justify the murder of Arbery here, they were doing so because, as far as they're concerned, these weren't human beings. These are not human beings. So that the very base thing of being seen as human is what we have to make people understand. As far as when you and I talked about allies, I honestly, can I be frank?
Go ahead, be frank. Go ahead.
I can't stand that term ally. It irritates me.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. Either you're a decent human being or you're not. That's it. I don't care if you're my ally. Either you are a decent human being that can see other humans suffering and give a damn, or you don't. I'm not giving you the out of I need you to be an ally of my community. Forget that. I don't need you to be an ally. I need you to be a decent human being. I need you to be a decent citizen and stand up for the rights of other citizens, even if they don't share your color or your sexual orientation or your gender or your sexual identity. You need, like, I always, I have a lesbian friend of mine. She's a liberal, and we talk about, lesbian issues. She tells me, give me understanding of the LGBTQ community. And I'm a house music DJ, so I already obviously know a lot of
people. Your house music definitely suggests you're familiar with the community.
But we talk, and she always says, "Oh, you sound like a feminist when I'm talking about women's rights." I said, "I'm not a feminist. I'm just a decent human being that understands that women have the same rights that I do. I understand that I can't just go touch women because I want to. I understand that a woman doesn't have to smile at me because she doesn't have to. These are basic human things. So when we compartmentalize that, well, you're allied to feminists if you believe women should have equal rights. No, I'm actually a human being that believes all of us deserve human rights, and every American citizen deserves the inalienable rights that we supposedly have on paper. So again, it's not about being out. It's about being a decent human being and teaching our children to be decent human beings, to actually give a damn about other people, regardless they look like you or not.
I think like what you and Cynthia actually commented too as well, and said that the younger generation, they're really kind of being activated there. This, you're right. That generation, they came up with terms that I never would have thought of. Like, who thought of pansexual? They're really encompassing, you know what I mean? Like an entire generation to say, yes, we're all human beings. We accept, like they came up with that term. I'm like, it wasn't even a thing. You know what I mean? So you're right. You're absolutely right.
I would also say that we're getting a little bit better too about how we present things to young children. And I think that also changes it. For example, when I was in my bachelor's program, I actually took a class on diversity in the classroom, which taught us as educators to be mindful of the images that we show young children. So for example, as a science teacher, if I'm going to present different scientists to my students, I need to make sure that I have an equal representation of African American, Hispanic, and white scientists presented to my students. And that is not something that I don't think was necessarily done decades ago. So we had generations of children growing up not seeing themselves represented within society. And also we had decades of Caucasians not seeing minorities represented in those areas when they didn't necessarily grow up around minorities. So if you weren't necessarily growing up in an area where you grew up around Black people, Mexican people, something other than your own race, you didn't have that outside exposure. Whereas we're now telling public educators, this is something you need to be mindful of, that you need to make sure that you're teaching children that they see a diversity, not just in race, but a diversity in abilities, in gender. We're trying to teach children to be more accepting off the base in school. And I think that also sometimes helps when maybe they're not getting it at home. Absolutely. That it sometimes helps that they're going to get this exposure when maybe the home isn't necessarily as accepting, because they're going to come to an age where they can make that decision for themselves. And absolutely. If they have enough empathy taught at a young age, they're going to have that ability to become old enough and to understand it. So if they're given that human perspective within the school, that humanization within the school is going to help them to possibly diverge in their thinking from what they've been taught at home.
Can we get that in the rural areas? I don't know. Just some of those rural areas in the South and even in the Midwest, I'm questioning. Go ahead, Ethan.
You got to get educator buy-in,
We do have a few guests waiting in the studio. So if we could just maybe quickly bring those on, I'd like to welcome our first guest, Kenneth. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's just hard listening to the fact that we're still talking about. I mean, there's just so much progress that needs to happen. I was thinking about something. I was listening to you guys. So I just want to talk a little bit about my own history of ignorance. So I grew up in Southern California, and where I grew up, it was just a very, very diverse part of the United States. And racism wasn't something that was on my mind. I really thought that we lived in like a post-racial society. And when I joined the Army, I got sent to live in Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina. And I started to see that I was just completely wrong, and that I didn't even know how wrong I was. I couldn't even comprehend my own level of ignorance. And then when I was going to law school, I was living in New York when Eric Garner got murdered by the NYPD, and Black Lives Matter was really starting to gain some momentum, and it just blew my mind how many white people that I knew that were my colleagues felt like they had the answers. And it's so obvious to me that the best thing people can do if you want to be a quote unquote ally is just listen.
Don't upset Richard. We just got that. Don't upset Richard anymore. We're not using that term.
I know. I'm just saying, just like the best thing you can do is listen and recognize that that your experiences, that you can't put yourself fully in the other person's shoes. And there's almost a level of arrogance to even thinking you can empathize. And that the best thing you can do is keep your mouth shut and your ears open and just listen. I don't know. That seems to me like the best thing that people in my position can do.
So I take it that you stand with the mob.
Sympathize. You can never sympathize because you've never been through it. But to empathize is just to imagine how bad that must be, and that's just to understand human suffering.
Right. And obviously we can all understand in the abstract, human suffering, but I mean, what I'm sort of hoping to caution people against is feeling like you can really know, that you can really understand what it's like to be in the other person's shoes when your lived experience is necessarily different. It just seems to me that being compassionate, and just listening and recognizing that you don't have, like all the people who jumped out being like, well, maybe the statute allows for certain citizen arrests and certain, like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, just shut your mouth. Like,
and I hear what you're saying, Kenneth. I understand. There was a situation where there was an offender who was locked up, and he was from out of state, and he was here in Illinois. He was from California, and it was funny because he was a Crip, and I was making Snoop Dogg jokes to him. But walked past him, and he was like, "Man, this sucks. I gotta get up out of here. I gotta go back to California." And we was like, my guy was like, "I feel you, man." He said, "No, you don't feel me, but you hear me though." And I had to think about what he said. It's like, you're right. I don't feel. I'm not behind those bars. You are. So I can't feel you, but I do hear you, and I do understand what you're saying. So I understand. That's what you're saying there.
So Kenneth, let me ask you: Are you standing with the mob?
I mean, yeah. Like from where I'm seeing, like everything that I've seen, it looks from my limited perspective. I mean, I would say that I'm very comfortable saying the man was murdered. The man was murdered.
Yeah. Are you able to? Would you share this stream on your page?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Way to put him on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
all right, Kenneth, I'm going to follow you just to make sure I can see this on your page. Because
do it.
Thank you, Kenneth. We're going to bring on our next guest, but
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having the conversation, guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Thank you.
All right. So next up, we do have Samantha. Hey, Samantha.
Hey, guys.
How are you? Samantha.
Hey, can you hear me?
Welcome.
Okay?
Welcome on the show.
I hear you have an interesting perspective.
So to give you guys a small backstory, because I can kind of go on a rant like Ethan. I'm half black, I'm half white. I'm half black, I'm half white. I was raised primarily by my white family. I have experienced extreme privilege being light-skinned, lighter complected, and I never really, what happened to Rick?
I don't know, but keep talking. It's live.
Okay.
So
I hadn't quite really saw these issues in the light that I do now. My mom never talked to me about this type of stuff. My parents are still together. My dad's black, my mom's white. My dad briefly talked about it here and there. So if I can get a little personal, I actually took it upon myself to bring up the topic to my mom, which I hadn't before. And I was telling Ethan, when I brought it up to her, those deflections you guys were talking about in the beginning were some of the first things that she said. It was quite disappointing hearing this from my own mom, because I heard you guys talk about the types of people that would use these deflections. Now, understand this is someone who has black children, someone who's married to a black man. It was quite hurtful. And the fact that I have a black daughter and a black son. Now, I didn't start paying attention to these types of issues and acknowledging real privilege until I had my son. When I had my son, I started to realize that he was even treated differently in school, in his preschool. He's only 2. And so I was expressing this to my mom, just using her as an example. here, because this is many people. My mom was very defensive and very ignorant. And I won't get into the comments that were made, but I'll say that guns, knives, whatever physical weapons we want to call weapons aren't the real problem. The weapon is white ignorance. The weapon is the lack of willingness to acknowledge white privilege, right? And the same white ignorance, the same ignorance that I feel like my mom had, or my grandmother, who's pretty openly racist, has, is the exact reason why my people have died, and the exact reason why people are still dying today. And I found it hurtful. I found it offensive. And I don't think they quite understand, like, I didn't do anything. I'm not my ancestors. I didn't, you know what I mean? But understand that that same ignorance you think is this tiny is exactly what, you know, what's his name, Travis or Greg McMichael, you know, they probably said similar things thinking that that was harmless, right? And look at how that ended up. Now, I don't know them personally. I'm just saying that this fear, this ignorance, this lack of knowledge, that's the real weapon here. And I feel like as a white person, as any colored person, you have a duty to acknowledge white privilege. You have got to acknowledge the privilege, at least that much. That's the least you can do.
So, real quick, Samantha, can we safely say you are on the side of I don't want to say the name wrong. I'm sorry.
No, I fully support condemning the actions of Gregory and Travis McMichael against Ahmaud. There's absolutely nothing that would justify what was done to him. I don't care what he stole. I don't care if he was like, I've looked through construction sites before myself. I've jogged myself. Run up on me and see what happens. I mean, I couldn't imagine. And to see this happy little, you know, picture that's going around of him, right? I look and I see my son's happy, smiley face. And my last thing I want to say is how I feel personally as a mixed race person, half Black and half white. Any white person that cannot empathize, that cannot acknowledge white privilege. I'm not speaking to my mom right now. It's quite sad, or my grandmother, or my family. But anybody who cannot acknowledge the privilege, for me, you lack the ability to empathize with me, which means that you lack the ability to love me and part of me the way I need to be loved. And so you can't truly have love for humanity when you lack empathy towards any of them.
No, I agree. And I want to ask you, Rick, I think your mic is muted right now, just so you know. I don't know why, but I'm not hearing you. So how would you react? I know this is just real quick. Imagine if two guys were chasing after you with guns. Would you immediately be like, oh, hands up? Or would you not be fearing for your life and try and fight back? Because who knows what they're going to do? You don't know who these guys are. Like, wouldn't you fight back? I mean, I guess
I would do exactly what I saw in that video.
Exactly.
I saw a struggle. I really can visualize this happening, and I immediately feel scared, terrified, and confused. Can you imagine how that man felt in his last moment?
No, it just drives me nuts that people don't see that. They're laughing it off and just.
And the thing that I'm trying to communicate to people, such as when me and my mom had this conversation, is I don't care what your grandparents taught you. You can't hide behind that anymore. At some point, we're all adults and we can make a conscious decision, right, to acknowledge the truth, right? When you're coming up with all the what ifs, even when I'm telling you what it is, and you still want to say things and throw it out there to justify it. I was kind of commenting earlier, I feel that a lot of it comes from a sense of guilt. I feel like at first, before I became passionate about these things, I used to go, gosh, why is Cairo's dad so angry all the time? He's racist. Why doesn't he like white people? And I wasn't seeing it the way I was supposed to be seeing it. I didn't understand his pain. I didn't understand until I had my son. And now I get it. And now I get the anger, you know.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I appreciate you coming on and being willing to do this. So,
Yeah,
and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so
Samantha.
much.
Thank you,
You guys
Samantha.
have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was very educational. That was something that.
Wait, can everybody hear me? Am
Yes,
I back?
we
Is
can
my
now.
mic working again?
We have
Okay, great.
2 more guests. I want to get this next
Okay.
just real quick. And then we're going to move on to Cynthia. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi.
Hi, Tiffany. Thanks for
Hi,
joining us.
guys.
You are on
Thank
the
you for
side.
having this.
You're on the side of compassion and love, correct?
Yeah.
So, would you do you show your support for Aubrey and
Absolutely.
and condemn
I
the
condemn those
Justice for
actions.
Ahmaud, yeah.
Those men are murderers, and it was an act of hatred, and it was not okay. I come from a minority-rich neighborhood. I come from a low-income town. I'm from Beloit, Wisconsin. And I've had a very unique upbringing. My grandparents walked in civil rights walks. My mother passed that down to me. My brother was part of a group called Timitemba out of South Africa, and it means Team Hope, and they would travel from village to village over there teaching about AIDS and how to protect themselves, and then come to the States and teach people in the States about apartheid and how recently that had been abolished. And that was probably the moment in my life where it really occurred to me, like, racism is still all around us. It's everywhere. And to not acknowledge it just allows that problem to continue. And now I'm raising 4 children on my own and trying to make sure that they stay on the side that I'm on, because over this last week, I've lost like 5 friends, or people I thought were friends, because it turned out that they're just these cruel people, and I can't allow that mentality in my heart. It's not like I'm going to fight them. Fighting them honestly just gets them all riled up and more angry. But I can't allow them my soul as a sacrifice. I can't say it this way.
Well, Tiffany, I want to thank you so much for coming on and showing your support for the situation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, I want to bring on our last guest who can help us resume for the rest of the show, Cynthia.
Oh, Cynthia's here. Oh, I was real quick to say happy birthday because she wanted a song. She told me she wanted a happy birthday song.
I did.
But I don't know if it's against the copyright infringement laws to actually sing happy birthday these days. It's a thing. That's what they told us in the restaurants, at least. But happy birthday.
Thank you. Now, I think I told you specifically that I needed your partner and you to come up with an arrangement in soprano, alto, tenor, and bass.
I know, and we talked about it. And when he gets home from work, he'll work on that, and we'll get that over to you.
Okay, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for that in my inbox. I'm just letting you know right now.
All right. Sounds good. What's going
on? So I really want to thank Kenneth, Tiffany, and Samantha for sharing their solidarity as far as like this particular topic is concerned. I really do wish that more people who may not necessarily be exposed to the whole dynamic of race would really speak out, because at the end of the day, this is a humanistic issue as well. It's not only just a race issue, it's a humanistic issue. And I think that one of the things that we people may not necessarily understand. I'm pretty sure that Richard can corroborate this, is the history concerning race and what we're seeing today. So when you're looking at these two men, who I immediately forgot their names, who actually pursued Ahmaud and ended up in an altercation and eventually killed him. This is the same type of situation that you would see oftentimes back in the day when slavery was still still at an institution in slave patrols. Slave patrols, as far as like, bounty hunters would be activated to actually go after slaves, and they would bring them oftentimes in a similar way. It would be better alive because they would get more money, of course, from like any time that they actually captured a slave. But if they died in pursuit, then they died in pursuit, and there would never be any type of repercussion. And now we're seeing, I think that I wrote a poem about how many names. I mean, like, we can talk about Eric Gardner, Sarah Bland, Trayvon Martin, Micheal Boyd. I mean, like, all these different people that have lost their lives unnecessarily, because, people are still in these mindsets when it comes to race and how Black Americans should be treated, because we never completely left the institution of what it really meant to be a slave. The whole purpose of slavery, especially when you even look at the way that they were counted as 3/5 of a person, is not even to look at them as a person. They were chattel. They were property. Yep. You can't look at anybody and consider them human if you're going to consider them property. So when I try to be very gentle with my car because I just paid it off and I'm not trying to buy another one no time soon. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to actually speak to my car or actually deal with my car like I would, like, you, Rick, or you, Richard, or you, Shanna.
Appreciate that. That depends on what kind of car you have now. What kind of car do you have? Because if you got, something along the lines of maybe a BMW-ish, you can speak to me like you speak to a BMW.
Not at all. I'm a social worker, so I ain't got no money. But anyway.
Gotcha.
I'm happy for my Ford Explorer. But anyway. but regardless, like, you're going to treat a thing or property or something that you purchase differently than you would a human being. And oftentimes this is something that we're continuously seeing recycled in our society. And these tropes about, like even when you are talking about earlier, like how Black men are looked, even when Samantha was talking about how her son is looked at and how he's treated, because he, even though that she is a biracial person, the first thing that any person is going to see when they look at her child, depending on who the father is a Black child, yep. And that is going to automatically come with all types of baggage that have perpetuated from generation after generation after generation. So we're going to continuously see these things constantly recycle over and over again, and it's to the point where we're going to see it in a red state, we're going to see it in a blue state. Majority of us, I believe, are all in the Chicagoland area, and Chicago has an abysmal record when it comes to police treatment of Black folk, period.
Well, and that's a very same thing that we were talking about a little earlier too, with how the cover up that took place in Georgia was very similar to the cover up that happened here with Laquan McDonald. Cynthia, I hate to cut you off, but let me ask you. So, of course, I'm going to assume that you are standing with justice for Ahmaud and condemning the actions of the McMichaels.
Of course I am. And I'm hoping that we can actually talk about this a little bit more tomorrow on our show on 13%.
Hey,
yes,
that's a good idea.
Wait. I forgot to ask the most important question. Cynthia, what is the 13%?
The 13% actually represents the population, the Black American population here in America. So, like, people who actually descended from chattel slavery, Black Americans who have been here for generation after generation, we share about 13% of the population. So we're going to talk about issues that actually deal with the 13%.
And when is that show on the air?
It will be on tomorrow, Ethan. I'm so glad that you asked.
And sorry. What time is that show on?
I believe that will be 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Central Daylight Time, but yes.
Daylight Time, yes.
Wait, and will this be broadcasted on YFNA News Network, or will this be on production?
The YFNA News, the news is
Cynthia, who
The
designed
new YFNA News Network on YouTube.
and Cynthia, who designed the YFNA News Network logo?
That would be me, Ethan.
That is such an awesome design too. Like I need to reach out to you for some more of your wonderful work there. That was great.
Oh, no worries. I know how to use that.
I think it's about time that we can kind of wrap this up, guys. This conversation can go on for duration of time, and it sounds like this conversation is going to continue tomorrow on the 13%, airing at 6:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So make sure. And where can we find this? YFNA News on YouTube, and where else? Where else can we locate this this outstanding show? This conversation that's going to continue.
It will also be on Facebook.com/The Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. It will be on that page, and it'll be on the YouTube YFNA News Network.
Awesome. Well, Cynthia, happy birthday to you. Thank you so much for joining us as that last guest and backstage. I'm sure Ethan did it on purpose so that we could all together say happy birthday to you. His Imperial Majesty, Richard Graves.
He ain't gonna never let me live this down.
You put that, and I had to use it. Any last words, thoughts, or anything you want to share before we wrap this up?
Again, I was glad to hear from all your guests, and I don't want to seem like I'm dismissive of allies, like I'm saying, but I just believe you just got to be a decent human being, man. Right. And you got to be able to see people as people, because like I said, I stand by what I said. If me and Rick go shoot a dog right now, we going to jail. And there's going to be white folk protested and wanting to see us dealt with. And they're not going to say, no one's going to say, well, the dog was barking too loud at them and they felt threatened. They're not going to say that. All right. And so,
especially if we get into the suburbs. So, yeah.
So if you can see a dog in some type of humanity, I would hope that you would start extending that to African Americans. And ultimately, you know, when I talked to you, Rick, the other day, I said, I'm kind of over white people with this. Meaning that I'm like, I don't care anymore. I'm at a point where I'm beyond caring what white people think or what they have to say. You know, I'm kind of a little bit more militant about it. You know, I'm a by any means necessary type of guy. And I think that we as black people need to organize amongst ourselves and do for self. And as far as I'm going to say this, I got a Glock. You run up on me, it's over with. And right now, I encourage any African-American male that can legally get one, legally get you a concealed carry, and legally carry your Glock. Because at the end of the day, rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6, as the 20th century philosopher O'Shea Jackson Ice Cube said in a song, Steady Mobbin'. All right? So, I mean, obviously, if they're not going to see you as human, then they see you as somebody with a Glock.
Yes, well, I appreciate that, man, and I'm definitely in the process of considering that as soon as things open back up. I don't know if that's considered essential right now, but I definitely need to go ahead and get my permit to carry as soon as possible.
Miss Cynthia, real quick, I'm sorry. I think you have audio playing in the background. I had to temporarily mute your mic because I keep hearing it's causing like some type of feedback. I don't know if you're hearing that.
Yeah, I don't have any audio playing in the background.
Okay, sorry, Rick. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. And Shanna, anything else that you wanna wrap up with?
And I think the main points here were just that, you know, as white population, we need to acknowledge what's going on. It's time to stop turning a blind eye. With white privilege, there's the option to tap out.
Oh no.
Turning a blind eye at this point is lowering yourself to the same level. That's how I feel at this point.
Cool. Well, thank you so much to you as well, Shanna, for being a part of this conversation, this discussion. Excuse me. Ethan Micheal, the Ethan Micheal, host of your Philly Neighborhood Atheist, and now launching YFNA News on YouTube. Any last words? Thank you so much for the platform. Any last words you want to wrap up with?
No, except check out the 13%. Oh, you know what? There's one quick thing I do want to wrap up on. But yes, check out the 13% tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Real quick, I just wanted to speak to, and I don't want to reopen the conversation. Actually, I'm not even going to go there. Rick, just go ahead, because this will open it will open like another thing. So Rick, please, the show is yours.
Well, but I appreciate that.
Now we want to know what you're going to say.
Can't really do that.
Now we want to know.
I know we got to get out of here. We got a few minutes left, Ethan. If you want to throw that out there, bro. No, okay. All right. Well, to all of you who have gotten a chance to pay attention, participate in this conversation, share this on your news feed, on your wall, on your social media platforms. Get your family, your friends, your circle, whoever, your squad involved in the conversation. Join in this conversation. Don't be complicit, and really speak to standing with justice for Ahmaud and the actions of two murderers. It's unacceptable, and the continued consistent racism in this country is unacceptable. And we need to have the conversations. White, Black, Latinx, whatever it is. Have the conversations. Share this on your page. Thank you for watching. Make sure that you check out Colorful Circle, FULL Circle. Follow us on with Rick and Al. Follow us on Facebook. And I appreciate you for being a part of this conversation tonight. Good night.